Why are you standing here?
I'm checking the parking permits, ma'am.
You don't look like you belong here. See? Badge and permit.
That doesn't prove anything. I'm authorized.
See my ID?
Still doesn't change what I saw.
Wait, you're actually on...
The man in the parking lot is a city-contracted parking inspector. His role is to move through municipal lots, verifying permits and documenting vehicles in compliance with city regulations. On this particular morning, he was performing a routine check in a mid-sized downtown parking facility. The lot was moderately busy, with cars coming and going, distant engine hums, and the occasional horn. From a distance, his presence can appear unusual. He moves deliberately between vehicles, carrying a clipboard and occasionally bending to inspect plates or permits. Parking inspectors often encounter misunderstandings in this environment. They are outside official offices, sometimes alone, in uniforms that may not immediately signal authority to the public. Prior incidents have shown that a quick glance at a badge or the uniform may not register with bystanders. Observers may interpret gestures, pointing, writing, or holding documents, as defensive or suspicious, especially if they are unfamiliar with the inspector's work. In this case, the woman mistook routine activity for an irregular presence. Security officers responding to such calls are trained to verify credentials, but patterns of assumptions can influence initial impressions. The inspector's calm demeanor contrasts with the tension created by misinterpretation. By the time the situation escalates, minor misunderstandings have compounded. A casual gesture is read as evasive, and an official badge is briefly questioned. The environment itself, traffic, pedestrians, distant construction noise, blends into the background, making the misjudgment appear subtle, almost ordinary. This is not an isolated situation. Across the city, inspectors and other field employees report similar encounters, where ordinary duties are misread as suspicious. Sequence of small, factual events, movement between vehicles, checking permits, standing in open areas, can trigger a chain reaction of assumptions. Each action is grounded in professional necessity, yet viewed externally through the lens of suspicion. The parking inspector has been working for the city for over a decade. His career is defined by consistency and attention to detail. Colleagues describe him as methodical and precise, rarely missing a step when verifying permits or documenting vehicles. He begins each day with a checklist, reviewing assignments, gathering paperwork, and ensuring all equipment is functional. His routine includes driving between lots, inspecting signage, and occasionally assisting new inspectors with procedures. Throughout his career, he has built a reputation for professionalism. His supervisors note his reliability and thorough documentation, which reduces disputes over citations or compliance reports. Despite the repetitive nature of the work, he approaches each assignment with care, aware that minor oversights can lead to misunderstandings or complaints. One previous incident illustrates how appearances can be misleading. A driver once saw him standing beside a car, taking notes, and assumed he was issuing an improper ticket. The driver confronted him aggressively, and the inspector calmly explained his task and showed his badge. The situation ended quietly with no formal escalation, but it highlighted the recurring theme of misjudgment in his line of work. Outside of inspections, he maintains a simple daily routine. Mornings start with coffee at a local cafe, followed by a commute that avoids rush hour congestion. Interactions with coworkers are professional and limited to work-related matters. His personal life remains private, unremarkable to strangers, and unrelated to the incidents that occasionally draw attention. This history provides context for the day's encounter. The inspector is not prone to confrontation or dramatic responses. His experience has prepared him to handle misunderstandings calmly, relying on procedure rather than argument. Yet, the repetition of small misjudgments over time reflects a broader pattern. Ordinary duties, when observed without context, can be misinterpreted by the public. The sequence of his professional actions is factual and deliberate, emphasizing that this is a grounded, real-world scenario rather than an isolated moment of conflict. The encounter begins as the woman walks through the parking lot toward the inspector. She approaches directly, speaking in a controlled tone. "Excuse me, what are you doing here?" she asks. The inspector glances up, keeping his hands visible on the clipboard. "Checking permits," he replies calmly. He points to the rows of vehicles, indicating his route for the morning. The woman steps closer, frowning. "It doesn't look like you belong here," she says. He lifts his badge and permit, holding them so she can see clearly. The officer assigned to the lot arrives shortly after, observing from a few feet away. He nods at her and says, "I'll check it out," though his expression suggests initial skepticism. As the inspector moves between cars, he bends to note plate numbers. A quick gesture toward a permit is misread by the woman as evasive. She glances at the officer. "See, something's off," she murmurs. The officer walks closer, scanning the documents but not yet addressing her concern. In the background, distant traffic hums, a car horn blares, and construction noises punctuate the air, creating an ordinary urban soundscape. The inspector continues his routine, documenting the permits. Each step, approaching a vehicle, checking a sticker, making notes, is methodical. The woman, observing from a short distance, begins to feel tension rising quietly, though she does not raise her voice. She gestures toward a nearby car, pointing out that she thinks the inspector may have been there too long. The officer glances at the clipboard again, noting the times recorded, but hesitates to intervene. The scene unfolds slowly, almost matter of fact. Misinterpretation occurs in small moments. A clipboard raised quickly, a pause while checking paperwork, a glance in her direction. The inspector does not react defensively. His movements are professional, deliberate, and unhurried, yet the woman's assumptions continue to influence the officer's perception. Subtle cues, a hand on a hip, a slight step back, are taken as signs of resistance rather than routine inspection. This initial phase establishes the environment and sets the stage for escalation. Ordinary gestures, procedural behavior, and background noise combine to create a situation that feels tense to the observer but remains routine in reality. The misreading of context demonstrates how quickly a standard inspection can be mistaken for irregular activity, and how small, factual details can accumulate into a quiet, growing misunderstanding. The officer steps a little closer, his hands folded over his belt. "I need to see some identification," he says again, though the inspector has already displayed his badge. The inspector remains calm. "This is my official badge and assignment log," he responds, holding them out clearly. The woman shifts her weight and nods toward the officer. "See, I knew something felt off," she says quietly. A pedestrian walking past glances briefly at the interaction, then continues on. A cyclist pauses at the crosswalk, curious but non-intrusive. Their presence is minimal, adding quiet witness to the scene without amplifying it. The officer reviews the documents slowly, flipping through pages, scanning the badge number and assignment sheet. He frowns, mutters something under his breath, and repeats, "I just want to be sure." The inspector maintains a neutral posture, hands visible, letting the verification process take its course. At one point, the woman steps back slightly, realizing her initial assumption may have been incorrect. The inspector makes a note on his clipboard, a movement the woman misreads as evasive. Her discomfort increases, subtle and contained, but no voice is raised. The officer's repeated questions, though polite, create a sense of quiet tension, a minor humiliation for the inspector who has done nothing wrong. For a brief moment, the inspector hesitates, aware that the officer has not yet fully accepted his credentials. A glance from the pedestrian underscores that he is being observed, adding a fleeting, understated pressure. Yet he continues to comply calmly, providing all documentation requested. The urban background, the distant honk of a horn, faint conversation, a passing delivery truck, remains constant, emphasizing the ordinary environment in which this misjudgment unfolds. The escalation is measured, built on repeated assumptions and small misread gestures. The woman's concern, the officer's caution, and the inspector's calm compliance create a chain of subtle discomfort. Nothing dramatic occurs. No force, no shouting, no confrontation. Instead, the tension is quiet, real, and procedural, highlighting how ordinary situations can become complicated when appearances are misinterpreted and assumptions persist. A supervisor arrives shortly after, walking briskly but without urgency. He carries a tablet with assignment records and approaches the officer and the inspector. "What's happening here?" he asks calmly. The officer gestures toward the inspector and explains the situation, noting the initial suspicion. The supervisor reviews the documents, the inspector's badge, assignment log, and parking permit. Each item aligns with the day's official duties. He glances at the officer and then at the woman, his expression neutral but focused. "All credentials check out," he states plainly. The officer pauses, brow furrowed, flicking between the badge and the log, a subtle hesitation in posture showing uncertainty. The woman takes a small step back, processing the verification. Her initial assumption has been quietly overturned. She looks at the inspector and nods, the recognition of error apparent but understated. No dramatic apology is offered. The scene remains calm. The supervisor instructs the officer to note the confirmation and to update internal reports, emphasizing procedure rather than blame. The inspector straightens slightly, closing his clipboard, his calm demeanor unchanged. The officer begins to relax, adjusting his stance, acknowledging the corrected assessment. The quiet shift in authority is noticeable. The tension in the lot eases, the previous misjudgment corrected through documentation and verification rather than confrontation. Urban background noise continues. Distant traffic, a passing delivery van, faint conversation between pedestrians. These ordinary sounds reinforce that the incident, while significant, unfolded in a regular, everyday environment. The facts are clear, verified, and uncontested. The quiet resolution highlights that misunderstandings can escalate even when all parties remain professional, and that correction does not require dramatics, simply adherence to procedure. Following the incident, the city initiated an internal review of the security officer's actions. Reports were submitted detailing the timeline, the inspector's credentials, and the interactions observed. The review focused on adherence to verification procedures, communication with bystanders, and the handling of suspected misidentifications. The officer received a formal warning and was required to attend additional training on credential verification and managing assumptions in the field. The training emphasized methodical confirmation of identity and the importance of maintaining professional composure, even when initial impressions suggest irregular activity. Policies for handling field inspections were clarified, with an emphasis on documenting actions before drawing conclusions. The woman involved reflected privately on the encounter, recognizing her assumptions had contributed to the misunderstanding. There were no public confrontations or dramatized apologies. The response remained procedural and discreet. Signage in municipal lots was updated to clarify the presence and role of parking inspectors, reducing the likelihood of similar misjudgments. Media coverage, when it occurred, focused on the procedural aspects of the incident rather than sensational details. Local reports noted that the situation was resolved efficiently and professionally, highlighting the city's measures to prevent similar occurrences. Public discussion centered on awareness of official roles and the importance of verification, rather than personal blame. The inspector continued his duties without interruption. Colleagues acknowledged the event as a routine example of misjudgment that can arise in the line of duty. His credibility remained intact, reinforced by the verification process and the procedural resolution. The city's response demonstrated that minor incidents, when addressed through proper channels, could result in policy improvements, reinforced procedures, and heightened awareness, ensuring that future field operations could proceed with greater clarity and fewer misunderstandings. The incident highlights how assumptions, even subtle ones, can shape interactions in everyday environments. When people interpret appearances without context, ordinary actions, walking through a parking lot, checking paperwork, can be misread as suspicious. These judgments are not inherently malicious, but can escalate situations unnecessarily. Bystanders, officers, and the individuals being observed each bring their own expectations to an encounter. Without verification, assumptions can guide responses, creating tension where none exists. In this case, a professional performing routine duties was initially treated as if he were violating rules, showing that systemic patterns of quick judgment affect both public perception and workplace interactions. Small procedural adjustments, confirming identity, reviewing credentials, documenting observations, help reduce the influence of assumptions. Awareness of these patterns allows institutions to mitigate misunderstandings before they escalate. The city's response, including updated signage and officer training, reflects the importance of structured, evidence-based approaches to routine operations. The broader lesson is simple. Assumptions are unavoidable, but their impact can be managed through careful verification and consistent procedure. By emphasizing fact over perception, organizations can ensure ordinary interactions proceed without unnecessary tension, and individuals can carry out duties without facing misjudgment. The incident serves as a reminder that professional roles, though routine, may be misunderstood, and attention to clear identification and transparent procedures can prevent similar outcomes. Have you ever experienced a situation where someone assumed the worst about you, even when you were following the rules? Or noticed assumptions affecting how others were treated in public spaces? We'd like to hear your thoughts. Share your experiences in the comments. How did you handle a misunderstanding? Or how did you see assumptions influence outcomes around you? Your examples can help others reflect on similar moments. If you found this story insightful, consider following for more real-life investigative accounts. We focus on everyday situations where small choices, assumptions, and procedures make a difference, and hearing from you adds perspective to these discussions.